we're going to start from newest Intel MacBooks to the oldest. So that'll get us starting off here with the 2020 MacBook Pro. Okay, so in 2020, Apple released the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and this was a significant model because it brought the scissor switch keyboard finally, again replacing the butterfly keyboard. And it introduced the same chassis of MacBook Pro that later the M1 MacBook Pro and the M2 MacBook Pro were based on. So let's just go ahead. We're going to look up on here how much these things are on eBay. So here's one right here. It's $579. Here's another one. It's $455. And I think for the kind of price that we're seeing there, that is not worth it. We see right below here, right below this MacBook Pro with the i5, we have an M1 MacBook Air. And even though, yes, that is grade D condition, not everybody's probably going to want that. That hides exactly what the problem is here with any Intel Mac as we start to talk about them, is that these M1 MacBook Airs, M1 MacBook Pros even also, are getting so cheap that it's becoming difficult for any Intel Mac to even be worth it. So I would say that the i5 MacBook Pros here, they're solid machines. They have good keyboards, of course, and I love the touch bar, but the performance difference between the M1 and from these is just way too great to justify the sort of price difference that we are seeing there. There's just no price difference, and you're getting so much less performance. So now let's just talk a little bit about the not the M series, but the MacBook Air from that same year with the i3. So let's just go ahead and see how much those cost. Here we go. There's one that's way overpriced for about $500. Here we go, almost $400. With 120 gigabyte SSD, 8 gigabytes of RAM. Here's one for $350. Now that's a little bit better of a price, especially considering that these MacBook Airs have the good scissor switch keyboards that replace the butterfly. So I would say this is a decent computer if you still happen to have one, but I know from personal experience that these are slow. They get super hot, they get laggy, and the fan spins up on them. And for $350, I definitely wouldn't buy it, especially considering that the M1 MacBook Airs are just a little bit more than that for, about $100 more than this. So that brings us back to 2019. And in 2019, we had the MacBook Pro 16-inch. And that was quite a beast of a machine. Back in the day, there was a lot of positive press around this MacBook. And we can see that they've gotten relatively cheap, all things considered. If you're looking for a MacBook with a big display, this price is pretty incredible. I mean, you have 16-inch display, a touch bar if you're a fan of that, the scissor switch keyboard that replaced the bad butterfly keyboards for $500. And I can see a case being made for these machines, especially if you really need that bigger display. Considering it's about the same price as getting an M1 MacBook Air, these perform relatively similarly to the M1 MacBook Air, albeit with getting far worse battery life and getting a lot hotter and having fan noise along the way. But these are pretty solid computers still in terms of performance. The one thing I would be worried about is logic board failure on these means it's pretty rampant, and the fact that software updates for Intel Macs as a whole, likely software support is going to end pretty quickly for them. So that puts this computer in kind of a weird spot where it's a nice computer, it still has a lot of performance, but it likely won't get the software support that it deserves for that level of performance. So now that brings us to the rest of 2019. In 2019, we had a whole lineup of 13-inch and 15-inch butterfly MacBooks that came out. And these were, of course, the last revision of butterfly keyboard MacBooks. So for all intents and purposes, they are going to be relatively expensive considering that they are butterfly keyboard MacBooks. So here is a MacBook Air that came out that year, $450 with the butterfly keyboard. I could not recommend that at all. Here's a MacBook Pro for about $380, and that's also just not worth it, especially considering we're looking at a 120 gigabyte SSD. Now, these have relatively decent performance for what they are. Starting in 2018, actually, we had quad-core processors that were hyper-threaded, so 8 threads across the CPU. Were in the 2018 and the 2019, even the 13-inch MacBook Pros. And the 15-inch MacBook Pros had 6-core processors, and even up to the i9 processors, starting with 2018 and 2019. So these computers do have more horsepower than the ones that came before it. But considering again that you're getting, a 13-inch or 15-inch MacBook Pro for like right here, we have nearly $500 for a butterfly keyboard, 2019 MacBook Pro. And just for the issues that you're going to have with this keyboard down the line, even if it seems to work fine right now, these keyboards are just known to fail, and they're known to have issues, even if they look clean on the outside, even if they don't have a poor environment that they're being used in. These computers just have issues long term with the keyboards. So, for all intents and purposes, I would stay far away from any of those 2019 Butterfly Keyboard Macs, considering the prices that they are sitting at. Now, I think 2018 is essentially the same story. Like I said, there's a lot of similarities there between the 2018 and the 2019 MacBook Pros, getting more processor cores, just getting a boost up in that overall multi-core performance that we see. And they also share relatively the same keyboard design. In the 2018, we saw those silicone covers that were within the butterfly key switches, which did help with overall reliability of the keyboards, but led to a worse overall feel of the keyboards. From my experience, I really vastly prefer the feel of the 2016 and 2017 keyboards. They have more of a tactile feel because they don't have that silicone membrane. So yes, like here we are. We see this one right here is a 2018 MacBook Pro. And it looks like it's in relatively decent shape for only $290. And this starts to be a price that, really is kind of tempting. I mean, you're getting a nice machine here, one that resembles a lot of what is still to this day, a relatively modern MacBook. You have an excellent trackpad. You have the touch bar, if you like that. You have Touch ID. You get a lot of computer for this price, but I think still we're not that far away from the price of an M1 MacBook Air. And I'm going to sound like a broken fiddle. I'm going to sound like I'm beating the horse dead with how often I'm saying that. But that's just the truth of this matter, is there's too many compromises with these machines, even as nice as they are. So now just jumping back to 2017. In 2017, we had the MacBook Pro finally dropped in price from $14.99 to $12.99. So it made it a lot more accessible to just everyday people. So we see, along with that 2017 13-inch MacBook Pro, the market was flooded with them, and they were sold for several years. So there's a lot of base model, 120 gigabyte, 8 gigabytes of RAM, 2.2 gigahertz i5 processor of these MacBook Pro 13 inches. And here's one, for example, right here. It's $220. It says has some cosmetic wear. And I use one of these computers personally for several years. I think I bought it in 2019 and I used it up until 2022 or so. And it was great. I loved the computer. I thought it was just an amazing machine. It had, of course, excellent trackpad, excellent display. The speakers on it were fantastic. And like I mentioned with the 2018, you're getting what looks like a modern, usable computer with one of these 2017 computers. It looks nice, but I found that the keyboard was it was unreliable, to say the least. I went through 3 keyboards on that machine. I had the original one, had it replaced, got another one, had it replaced. Um, so I think I can't say this for sure, but I think a lot of people that do still use these machines are dealing with the keyboard issues that they have, whether that be a left shift key that doesn't work consistently, or just an L key, or a random key on the keyboard that occasionally double taps when they tap it once. Also, now in the 2017 models and before, we are out of software support. The 2018 models, as of right now, recording this video, are still supported with current macOS Sonoma, but the 2017s are stuck on Ventura. So you're permanently stuck with older software, which means that you will not get software support. And with time, apps will stop downloading their latest versions. You'll have to use older versions of the apps. So just again, you see these prices and they're super tempting because they're such nice computers in everything except for software support and keyboard. But just be careful. I think you're going to have issues with the keyboard and you might regret it because of that. So that is what you should know about the 2017s. Then there's also the 15-inch version of it, which is significantly more powerful because you have a quad-core processor instead of the dual-core. And as you can see here, those are not that much more money compared to the 13 inches. So you're getting a lot more power, you're getting better speakers, and really these are pretty incredible machines. I owned a couple of them. I have some videos about them on my channel, but again, just be wary of the keyboard issues. I think even though it's only $275, likely you're going to have issues with the keyboard long term, and you might regret that. But that is a really nice price, and that's a lot of computer for that price. And I think the story maintains about the same for 2016. There wasn't much of a real performance difference between 2016 and 2017 MacBooks. It was just an upgrade in the processor from 6th gen to 7th gen Intel. And you can see that they're about the same price. 13-inch for $225. And the problem with these ones is you're stuck on software support even a year before what the 2017s were at. So that means you're stuck at Monterey instead of Ventura. And I know everybody in the comments down below is going to say, well, just use OpenCore. And I think OpenCore works, but it's not a solution I would recommend to everybody. I found in my own personal experience, it was annoying at times when it would break or when I would have to do a software update and go through all the extra steps that OpenCore requires to install the drivers again. And it was just a lot of extra work I wouldn't recommend most people deal with. But again, those that I'm speaking to here in this audience likely are okay with those compromises. So I think that's everything that is to be said about that year of MacBook Pros. I did skip over the 2017 MacBook Airs, and I think that these later MacBook Airs, they're pretty cheap. Like this is an auction, of course, so it might go up. It probably will go up, but that's $80. And we see this one here for $130. And these machines, of course, have a good keyboard. They're not going to give you issues like the Butterfly computers, but the processors in them are even older than what we saw in the 2016 MacBooks. These are 5th gen Intel dual-core i5s. And another thing to note with these MacBook Airs is the screens are a TN panel rather than an IPS panel. They're far lower resolution with worse viewing angles. So you're getting you're getting a computer that has MagSafe, that looks nice, that's portable, it's lightweight, but it's old at this point. And it's showing that age in terms of performance and just the screen quality and the design of it. Another thing you're missing out on with these 2015, 2017, any of these MacBook Airs that are older is you have the older board style trackpad instead of the haptic trackpad that we saw with all of the later MacBooks. So I don't want to spend too much time on those because um, I just don't think they're really worth it at this point. I think you're missing out a lot on those bigger and better features that we see in later MacBooks. But they are a consideration for those on a really tight budget, and who appreciate, the good keyboard and the MagSafe charging capability on it. I don't want to skip over the 12-inch MacBook. That was released in 2015 and was sold through several years after that, but the latest model came out in 2017. So these are super small, super light computers, of course. Let me see if I can find one here for sale. Here's one. That's an auction, so that'll probably go up in price, but that's cheap. And then this one, of course, $200. And these are super unique little computers. Super lightweight. They only have one port, of course, on the side. But the biggest limiting factor of these computers is that Intel Core M3 that's in them. These things are slow. There's not a lot of horsepower to them. So if you're looking at value for your money for the performance that you're getting, these are not a good buy. You're far better off looking for a later model, especially like the 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro will give you far more horsepower. But again, if you're looking at this computer, you're probably interested in how small it is, how light it is, and there's no MacBook that has gotten close to that still. It's quite a unique machine. But again, I just have to leave the huge asterisk in terms of the keyboards are not good and it's going to give you issues. Just look it up. Trust me on this. Check out one of my videos that I've made about butterfly keyboards. You're going to have issues with it. That's almost a guarantee if you use it for more than just a few months. And I know that there are some people who haven't had issues with them that have been kind of anomalies in that respect. But in my personal experience, I've owned 5 or 6 MacBooks with butterfly keyboards, and I think all of them but one have had issues that have made me very, very annoyed with them. Okay, so now we're just continuing to go backwards, and I don't want to go backwards too far because I think once you get before about 2015, the computers are getting a little bit too old for me to reasonably even talk about. I know that there are many people that use older MacBooks that use, 2012 MacBook Pros, 2013, 2014 Retina MacBook Pros. But from what I see here in pricing, you're losing a lot of performance by going for a 2012 or 2013 MacBook when you could be getting a 2015 MacBook for basically the same price, or even a 2017 for that matter. So the MacBook Pro 2015 is one that I have covered on my channel. It's a fan favorite computer. I see a lot of comments on it. I see videos about this computer that people just love these computers, and you can see they're cheap. $156, and these are prior to, of course, the redesign in 2016 in MacBook Pro that brought the butterfly keyboards and the issues that came along with those. These are traditional keyboards, scissor switches, and they even have the haptic trackpad, which came out in 2015 for these MacBook Pros. So that is an improvement for these. And I would say for $150, if you need a basic computer to use, these will get the job done, and they're pretty solid little computers. But I will say, though, that you're missing out on a lot of little improvements that Apple made in their MacBooks with time. Um, for example, between the 2015 and the 2016, yes, you're getting the butterfly keyboard, you're getting the issues that came with that, but you also have a screen that's brighter, that has more contrast. You're getting a thinner body that feels a lot more modern. You're getting better speakers. You're getting a better webcam. You're just getting an overall experience there that is far more modern and frankly is more desirable in 2024. So I think these are probably the computers that I feel the most comfortable in recommending on some level, because they have solid keyboards that aren't going to give you issues, and they're cheap. They're really cheap. So I think this is a really good place to be for just a basic Mac that you want to have around the house. So in conclusion, if I was to recommend a MacBook to you in 2024, I think the very first one I would send you to is the MacBook Air M1. That is the computer that I personally use, and it just nails just about everything. It's just a fantastic keyboard. The battery life is so good, you just forget about it even being a laptop half the time. It's just a fantastic machine that gets everything done. It also is getting pretty dang cheap. You can see this is $350. That's kind of an anomaly of a price, but you start to see these kind of deals show up on eBay if you look around enough. The overall kind of price on the street for one of these things is probably about $500. You can find one in decent condition for $500, and that'll get the job done for you. Now, if $500 is too much money for you, then I I can't give you a really confident recommendation anymore, because I don't feel comfortable recommending to you any of the laptops with the butterfly switch keyboards. But if you're willing to take that risk, and if you're able to find one with a low battery cycle count that the seller says it has no issues, and you're able to test it yourself, you can take a risk on it. And then again, I recommend that 2017 MacBook Pro 15-inch. And again, what that one gives you is dedicated graphics, a quad-core processor, 16 gigabytes of RAM by default, and software support up through macOS Ventura. So again, you're outside of software support, but I think this computer does give you quite a bit for that price that it's asking. So it's definitely one to consider, again, if you're willing to take that risk on the butterfly keyboard. Then below that, I think I would just recommend the 2015 MacBook Pro. And the 13-inch is definitely slower than the 15-inch, because again, the 15-inch has the quad-core processor. But if you can pick up one of these, you have a good keyboard here, you have a haptic trackpad, and it shouldn't give you too many issues. These computers have been remarkably solid. So that's overall my 3 recommendations for you if you're looking at a used MacBook in 2024. Thanks again. Bye.